Welcome to Syntax. Today we've got a potluck for you today, which is you submit the questions, we bring the answers. We got some really good questions today around is having TypeScript errors okay? What about TypeScript branded types? Is that an interesting pattern or not? Wes, was wrong about QA. Some interesting submissions from people who work at banks and how QA works with them, streaming responses versus polling, and finally, storing access cookies and authentication in a cookie, or should that go in the server database? Really good questions. If you got a question yourself, go to syntax.fm, click on the Potluck Queues button in the nav and submit your question. We'll answer it on a future episode of Syntax. Let's get into it. How you doing today, Scott?
Oh, I'm doing super good, man. Just hanging out. Kids had fall break, so they were home all for the past maybe week or so, and we did a lot of fun stuff because we were supposed to be on vacation, and that had to get canceled. So yeah, we just did a lot of cool stuff. Yeah,
I saw you went on a hike.
I saw you went on a hike, copycat.
I'm not much of a hiker, but my kids go on these forest days at school. And they've been absolutely loving it. They're like, can we go on a hike? And I was like, sure, I can hike. Yeah. It's a lot of work.
Yeah, Colorado, believe it or not, has like 10 billion hikes. So we just drove into Breckenridge and found one that was walkable from the downtown. But yeah, you're hiking up a mountain and our kids like it, but I think they get bored after like the 2-3 hour mark. They're like, all right, get me off this thing.
Yeah, we didn't go that long. We went like an hour and a half or 2 hours, something like that.
Yeah.
It's just long enough. Lots of waterfalls in Hamilton, so they're pretty excited about that.
Oh, that's dope. That's the best kind.
Yes.
Hey, Wes, if you're seeing a lot of waterfalls in your code that are potentially slowing down your site, right? You didn't realize that you are loading things in a certain way, and you have a slow route on your site. Well, you can discover that, fix it, find it, and make it better, make it faster, make it less miserable for your customers with Sentry at Sentry.io. Their performance tracking tools are one of my favorite things in the entire world because when we first launched the Syntax site, man, there were just some little things here and there that we did not see. And then when you start to get the score saying, this particular route is slow, then you could say, let me dive into why that might be. Oh, here's why. We're loading a giant transcript on everybody, even if they're not visiting the transcript page. Let's fix that, right? So head on over to Sentry.io/syntax. Sign up and get 2 months for free. Use the coupon code at TastyTreat. All right. Now let's get into
TLC was
the questions.
Wrong. You should go chasing waterfalls, and you should fix them with Sentry.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Perfect, Wes.
But first question we got here from Brad. What are the limitations of SvelteKit? Are there certain applications it wouldn't be good for? I thought this was kind of interesting. What do you think, Scott?
As somebody who ships everything with SvelteKit, I'm going to say no. There are no limitations. No, there's none. You know what? I honestly don't even know because it can do static sites well. It can do node-based sites well. It can, deploy to workers. It can deploy to serverless. It can do all that very well. You can have, an API-based site instead of using their RPC sort of system with the form actions. Mm-hmm. Man, I'm having a hard time. I've deployed apps with SvelteKit using Tori. I've deployed even just this is crazy, but I wanted to do a Cloudflare worker, and it was easier for me to just do it in SvelteKit because I wanted a small UI attached to it. Like I found myself writing HTML templates and strings, and I was like, you know what, I'll just bump this into SvelteKit and do it that way. So are there limitations? Probably limitations somewhere, but man, I've built everything with this, and I don't know, it holds up. That's all I can say. Yeah.
Maybe what about the partial hydration or the server islands point? Because with SvelteKit, you're kind of going all in and the whole website needs to be rehydrated. But if that's the case where you want certain parts of your website, so the idea behind server islands is that you server render everything static and then you opt into pieces of the application that are going to be client rendered and they're going to be dynamic. So I was on a panel about this at the conference last week, and I came up with this stupid idea of people were asking how do I transition from 100% SPA to an Astro where you sort of opt in to the client kind of thing, the island approach. And I was like, well, you can start off with 100, 1,000 islands, and you can just start syncing those islands, meaning you can just kind of piecemeal, component by component, move them off of the client onto the server. So the syncing islands approach, you heard it here first. That's my invention there.
Yeah, I could get into some of my gripes about SvelteKit if you want to hear that.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Like, I think you can build anything with anything.
Yes.
There probably are situations where you get into very large applications where you go, it would be really nice to have partial pre-rendering or a lot of this like kind of odd stuff that like Next.js has a lot of this really advanced stuff. And most people probably don't need that. But if you're getting into really, really heavy applications, it sure is nice to have it.
Yeah, you mean like partial pre-rendering is like certain templates are partially pre-rendered? Is that what it does?
Yeah,
Or
yeah, and like not page
not
by
on a
page.
route base?
That's
Yeah.
almost always my gripe with every framework is that I don't want to do data loading at a page level.
Oh my God,
because
yes,
my
yeah.
data is associated with a component. Figure it out. I want to fetch the data in the component. I want to take care of the data in the component. Or if it is a page level thing, I can pass it in. But that's often my gripe.
Yeah, I would say if we're getting into gripes about SvelteKit, those are my gripes. One, data loading is tied to routes. I would really prefer if it wasn't tied to routes. Two, the islands architecture, I would prefer to be able to do partial rehydration and islands and all those things out of the box. Those are my two biggest gripes with it. Other than that, it pretty much handles everything I need it to handle.
I still want, and I think you said this is coming. I still want to do multiple components per file.
Yes,
all the time.
It's here.
I'll find myself in a component or a page where I'm like, I'm looping over this, and inside the loop, I want it to be its own component. But as soon as I have to move it to a separate file, then I got to redeclare all the props and export everything. It's like this whole thing whenever you make a new component. And I was like, I just want to have a separate template thing. So that's coming. What's that called?
By the time that you listen to this episode, fans of syntax and listeners, dear listeners, by the time you listen to this episode, this will be released. It's in Svelte 5. It's called snippets. And basically, you're just defining like a function, essentially, in a template tag. And you can pass variables into it. You can type it all. It can all be type safe. So yeah, it's called a snippet in Svelte 5. And that's a good way to do that, where you might not want to have a whole other component existing outside of your component, but also maybe you want to have something that you might refactor later and you're just hacking together. So yeah.
Yeah, just quickly.
It's here. Sick. All right, next question from Squinklebutt. What are your thoughts on branded types in TypeScript? They seem nice for things like record IDs and email addresses, but there's a fair bit of code setting them up. Is it worth it? So the problem that this is trying to solve is if your type representing your data is not specific enough.
Do you want me to take a stab at explaining it?
You take a stab at explaining it, because I don't necessarily, I'm going to say before you even get to it, I don't see the need for this, but yeah.
All right. So at a very basic level, let's say you have a function that takes in an ID, generate display user, and it takes in an ID, right? And that ID is going to be a string, right? You could literally pass it any string, and TypeScript is going to say, looks good, that's a string, and you're just like, no, I kind of want it to be a user ID. It's also great for documentation where your function takes in an ID, but then you brand it as a user ID. Like, okay, I know I have to pass in a user ID and not some other type of ID in this case. So the idea with branding is that you can sort of take a simple type, like a string, and extend it so that it will be named something different. Another example I have is latitude and longitude. When you are defining a tuple in TypeScript, a lat-long tuple is simply going to be an array with number, right? And for me, I think, that's okay, but I've often mixed up lat-long with long-lat because some mapping uses long then lat and some uses the opposite.
Totally.
So a great use case for that is to simply brand it and have a name on there, because when you're filling out the tuple, it will not just say number, it will say latitude, longitude. And in that case, I'm branding a number as longitude. And then I can have a tuple with that spot in it. So essentially, it's still just a number, but it has a type of longitude.
It's a type for your type.
Yes, exactly. So
yeah,
I don't have a ton of use cases for it. It's more getting into like the validation realm of things where you're like, and usually the way that it works is you put like an __ brand property on your object. Almost every time that I reach for them, then you run into issues where you are just passing a straight up number and it says, hey,
yes,
this is a number, not a longitude that's been branded. So then you got to brand it properly, and you're doing all this annoying like jumping around. So I don't know. I use them every now and then, but they can be nice for record IDs, like you said. But I would say probably not worth it unless you're explicitly having a problem that would fix.
Yeah, and to be clear for the audience, the brand generic is something you make yourself. So we've included that in the show notes, what that looks like. It's just a type brand with a couple of generics in there. But, yeah, to me, it just feels like extra work for what could be pain down the line, even if it is giving you clarity. I think it might be different for maybe library authors than for like individual app code, but who knows? I don't know. To me, it just seems like overkill, but everything seems like overkill until you have the need for it. So
exactly. Yeah, people are not just making stuff up because they want to. These are problems that they've actually run into. So in my opinion, it's always good to learn these things and then just have them in your noggin so that when the problem comes around, you go, Wes and Scott talked about branding. Okay, we need to do that.
Yeah.
Next question we have here from Ruby Dev, longtime listener, first time caller. Wes, you've recently mentioned never using a queue in applications, so it's got me thinking, how do you handle sending email in your projects? If you're using SMTP, have you never run into performance issues? I've come from a more classic MVP, batteries included background, so offloading potentially slow tasks like SMTP email and sending that to a background worker rather than tying up the main process is just a convention. In Node, Express, Hano, etc., like the JavaScript stack, would a fire and forget a promise that sends an email be more or less a poor man's queue? What's your take on this? So yeah, this is perfect example of, in my application, when you buy a course, I do a whole bunch of stuff, right? You create it in the database, you validate the data, you charge the credit card, and part of that process is sending an email to that user that here is your actual process. And the performance issue that you could run into here is that if your user clicks buy and they're sitting around waiting for all of that to happen, sending an email could be another 500 milliseconds or whatever for them to sort of sit around and wait for that type of thing, right? So what most people do is they'll simply just throw that in a queue, and then another process will pick that up in the queue and say, oh, I got some emails to send, and they'll send the email pretty quickly. That's why sometimes when you like do a password reset, sometimes it comes immediately. Sometimes it comes like 20 seconds later. That's because they're processing their queue and maybe they can't possibly keep up for it. So what do? I do the poor man's queue, which I'll explain has just bit me a couple weeks ago. So the poor man's queue is fire and forget, meaning that I will simply just fire off the send email function. I will not await it, but I will tag a .catch on the end. And what that does is I can send the response back to the user while that's still happening in the background. That works on Node.js. It works on some serverless platforms where you can still do work after you've sent the response. Actually, I think Laravel announced this the other day as well, where, you can fire off a function and it will keep running even after you've sent the response to your user. And that's worked great for me for probably 10 years because I still know if something's happening because the catch will run and catch my error and I'll see it in my Sentry. But I ran into a problem the other day where my email provider, which is Postmark, been a big fan of Postmark. They had an SSL certificate expire and they were down for 12 hours. And what happened was, for 12 hours, the send email was sending, but their SSL certificate was down so that my requests were being blocked. And in my case, I didn't have a queue. In most cases, the queue would realize, oh, that didn't send. Let me try again. And and then as soon as it comes back online, then the queue would just keep on sending. In my case, I had 12 hours worth of emails that simply did not send, right? And I could see it. There's people trying to reset their password 11 times because I'm not getting the email, right? So I had to go through and look at what emails had tried to be sent or what people had bought something in the last 12 hours and manually trigger those to send. Had I had a queue set up, that would have not been an issue for me. So certainly a poor man's queue will get you so far, but I need to get a queue now that I hit that actual issue.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever had enough emails being sent out where this has been a problem I need to worry about, because I guess I'm not working on anything that has like a crazy amount of concurrent users trying to create accounts, right? Even with Level Up, you would have, I don't know how many people creating an account at once. It never got anywhere where it was.
It's not even
taxing.
That. Even if you're getting like one every 30 minutes, that would still be 24 people that didn't get their emails because we're just assuming the SMTP service will be up.
Yeah, you're right.
Right?
Yeah.
In that case, you cannot assume that your third-party infrastructure will be up, even if you're up.
Yeah, that's a good point. One thing that it further makes me miss Meteor here is that there used to be like a really good Meteor automatic like queue system where it was just like you drop in a plugin and now you got a queue, add to queue, like you had to do zero work to get this queue and it persisted to the database. I miss that kind of thing because then it was easy to do this stuff. Maybe it is anyways, and I'm just being ignorant, but yeah.
Yeah, I think it is relatively easy to get up and running. I will implement it and come back to you and explain my process.
Let's do it.
A little hasty on it. Yeah.
I would love that. Thank you. Next one is from QA Lava. Good day, legends. Not a question. I just don't have Twitter, so I couldn't tweet you about this. Just listened to the potluck where you discussed QAs and was a bit surprised with Wes's answer. And I think it might be reflected of his lack of experience working in a dev team. It totally is.
I put this in here because it is.
Yes, I love it.
This is the lack of experience episode of Syntax. Yeah, Wes's lack of experience.
Well, mine as well, yes. Not a stab. Wes is obviously an incredible dev. We all just have different paths. That's correct. A decent QA team is invaluable and has a very different role to unit integration E2E tests. I worked at a few companies with dedicated QA teams, and their role is much more than poking around your work and seeing if it's ready. They will triage issues, provide repro steps, actively work with you to check changes, work with stakeholders, and ultimately use the app in a way automated tests could never. If your tests can replace your QAs, then you have shit QAs. The automated test approach also assumes devs are given time to write good tests and are skilled enough to write high-quality tests, both of which I've seen at maybe 50% of the places I've worked. Not a dig, love your work, cheers. Hey, I agree with you, QA Lava. Not because I've worked with better QA teams, but I do understand that these folks are valuable for a reason, and it's not just to make your dev's life harder, especially at higher stakes organizations.
Yes.
I think that's the big thing. A lot of times we work in JavaScript, and honestly, this helps keep Sentry to be a popular tool, and we just huck stuff up, right? we just huck it over the wall and see if it works, and then checks our errors when with our Sentry. And by all means, do that because we want you to keep subscribing to Sentry. But I do think QA, I do think it's important. So thank you for this perspective here.
I heard from a lot of people after this episode, which I thought was really good. Specifically, I heard from one guy who works at a bank, and he said, we have a huge QA team, and it was mostly that this stuff is extremely high stakes. We need somebody to go absolutely through it all, and they have their own processes to make sure everything gets hit and whatnot. So they are invaluable to our team. And like this thing said as well, is that they can reproduce it. Like if a user is saying something is not working, a QA, I never even thought about this, but a QA team can actually sort of guard the developers and say, is this an issue? Where is it happening? How is it happening? In what circumstance? And then you can bring all of that to the developer and say, here's a nice tidy bug that we filed. Here's all the issues that's going on. So that was really interesting to hear. And then at the conference last week, I talked to somebody else from a very large bank, and they said they are trying to automate a lot more of their tests because they said we have 40,000 pages and they will go through several thousands of them. And if there's a bug on every page, like it's an app-wide bug, they will log it for every single page. And then you have to go back and forth with them. And that seems like a crappy QA team, like this question said, where it's just making more busy work. And now the developer says, like, I hate it because I have all this like back and forth. I have to talk to them. We have to have meetings. And like, I just want to get back to actually building stuff. But now I have this like other client, which is the QA team. So it certainly thinks he's like, I want to automate a lot of it. I think that stuff should be automated, but your QA team should be there to serve you and to help you, which is what I've been learning. Quite a few people reached out, and I thought that's what I love about this podcast. You get to hear what everybody actually does.
Yeah, and respectful too, man. QA Lava, shout out to not just being a jerk about this and being like, hey, Wes is wrong, but he's great anyway. So I love that. That's the best way to tell us we're wrong, is to tell us how great we are while you're telling us we're wrong. Yeah.
Next question from Nathan Noller. You should do a show on Invoker commands. They're not quite spec yet, but they are awesome, and there's a polyfill. You can declaratively wire together buttons and dialogue elements, as well as a number of others with Node.js. So that whole word comes up quite a bit when we're on the show, is declarative. And what that means is that like writing HTML is declarative. When you are associating a label with an input, simply just by writing the HTML, that's declarative, right? React is very declarative of looping over and displaying elements rather than like waiting for events. So Keith Crickle is the author of them and is really interesting person too. Yes, highly recommend you follow Keith on Twitter. Very good. You'll also see him in like every GitHub thread about every web standards.
Yeah, I know.
A web dev who's crossed the divide into implementing features and whatever. So invokers, I don't think I've seen this yet. So I'm going to throw it over to you, Scott, because you have dove into it.
Yeah, I actually, during my last Denver script, I did a bit on invokers because I think they're really super cool. And like this person says, they're not here yet. And the polyfill isn't really, it's useful, but it's not that useful because it doesn't support most of the proposed invokers. So what you can think about when you think about invokers is an attribute to trigger some sort of an event. So you might put on a button a invoker, which is the command. It's the command attribute. And then you have a command for attribute, which is an ID of the thing. So let's say you had a popover. You could have a button with command for and ID to the popover itself. And then the command is a string of one of the following: toggle popover, hide popover, show popover. There's also show modal or close, which work for dialogue elements. So basically you're sidestepping a JavaScript click event or anything and putting it directly as an attribute. Now, where this gets cool, Wes, is that it's not just those. The other proposed ones are for like the details element, toggle open close, the dialogue, toggle cancel, the select, show picker, input.
Yeah.
Input show picker is one that I would love because I just had the situation the other day where I'm trying to show the picker in Safari, and for some reason iOS Safari does not support that method. Now, there's even other ones like an input type number. You could invoke the command of step up or step down, or for video and audio elements.
The video and audio, we gotta have this.
Right. So you could build a custom play button for a video component without JavaScript by having a command play on a command for to catch the video. Yes. So basically,
this makes so much sense.
Yes. It's like click events in HTML using this command and command for. And there's a handful of proposed ones. I posted a link to OpenUI's blog post on invokers, their explainer. It's well worth your read. This could save a lot of JavaScript, but it could just make things way more clear. It's essentially, it's like adding an inline on click and firing some JavaScript like you would in React or something. Gotta have this.
I've like written this many times with video and audio elements where I'll just have like a data dash action equals,
and
then I'll just put the like play, pause, toggle, whatever in there, and then I'll listen for anything that has a data dash action, and then I'll run that method programmatically from the data attribute. This is great. I wonder, the only thing that I'm like, is there's no like arguments, right? So like there's not one for speed up or speed down, because people are going to say, well, what if I want to speed it up by 10%?
Yeah.
Or what if I want to run this function after a certain amount of money or a certain amount of time? That's probably where you start dipping into JavaScript, but I think that would be also nice to have like a command dash argument. I don't know. That before you know it, we're recreating JavaScript in declarative HTML.
Yeah. But yeah, Invoker's well worth your time. Give it a read. Like I said, I talked about this at Denver Script, and that talk is online if you want to see that as a part of my you might need less JavaScript than you think talk. So yeah, cool stuff. I'm excited for these.
Cool. Wow. I'm into that.
Oh, and I should say the polyfill, it supports just the popover and dialogue ones, or at least a couple of the dialogue ones. It doesn't support any of the other ones just yet. So you can use the polyfill if you want to try that out. Nice and neat. So next one from Ryan. Hey guys, you recently released a 2-parter sharing a number of apps and tools that you use. Some of them were pretty cool on the list. I'm going to download none of them. Maybe I'm just paranoid, but I've gotten to the point where I download almost nothing to my computer. I used to be the type who would crawl all sorts of these lists to fill my hard drive with fun and interesting and useful tools, but I've become much more concerned about security and privacy lately, especially with the advent of AI. That is smart of you, Ryan. I no longer feel that it's worth it to download an app which might be kind of cool, but also might be sending my keystrokes, passwords, bank account info, and other confidential information to their servers without my knowledge. Is this something to worry about? Do you do any kind of vetting or sandboxing when trying these new apps? Yeah, I think the only way you can really know what exactly is going in and out of an app with ease is by using Little Snitch, which is an application that anybody who's pirated anything in their life would have seen Little Snitch. But Little Snitch is basically an application that lets you know any request going out from any application. And by default, when you turn it on, it like pops up a dialogue any single time somebody's trying to phone home. So if an application is trying to phone home for whatever reason, Little Snitch will pop up and say, hey, this app is trying to connect to this server. Do you approve of this message? And it allows you to say yes or no. Man, Little Snitch has gotten a glow up. I haven't been on this website in a little bit, but man, new version of Little Snitch looking nice.
They had like a mini snitch or something like that a little while ago. I installed it for quite a while because there's something about these apps it's kind of scary, right? Like, especially with a lot of I talk a lot about all these keyboard, and I have several apps that will respond to keyboard input globally. Like, you have to go into your Mac OS settings and give it full access to everything. Keylogger, so you essentially just install the keylogger, and then like it's kind of scary, right? And I will often open up Proxyman and see what an app is doing as well. But there's this like delicate balance between like using Little Snitch, or even Mac OS is pretty good at about it. They're so aggressive that if you do want to give something access to your screen recording or whatever, it's actually kind of hard, right? You got to find out where it is, and you got to turn it on and restart the application. But if there's too many pop-ups, then it's so annoying, right? Especially to regular users. So I don't know what the solution is here. It's the same thing with node modules, other than lots of people have eyes on this type of stuff, and you have to have a bit of faith at some point that these people are not doing awful stuff, because there's lots of like, I think this is a huge vouch for the web, because the web is sandbox by default, right? Mm-hmm. Like, often iOS is like this as well. I'll see these TikToks all the time where people are like, don't scan a QR code, because when you scan a QR code, it's going to download all your information and all your contacts will be sending it. And I was just like, that stuff kills me, because I'm like, unless there is a major, major vulnerability, we would have heard about it. And also, people are not trying to steal your contacts if they have a major vulnerability. They're selling it to countries who are in war for millions of dollars. And that also, like, technically, I understand. No, the web doesn't work like that. You can't just go to a website and it just gobbles up all of your photos. You have to explicitly give action to those types of things. Now, that's where like phishing and whatever comes in, where you're trying to trick people. But the web, especially a URL, the URL bar is a major security thing. So I agree with you. I prefer them to be on the web. And that's why I wish that the progressive web app was a little bit better, because often I'll just download the Electron version of an app because I just want the icon and I want it to be on my desktop. But if they're shipping an Electron app, they can do whatever they want to that build. And it's kind of scary. So I agree.
Yeah. Yeah, I think this is smart of you to vet your stuff. I think we're all probably being a little unnecessarily reckless with many of these things. So little snitch if you want to have an eye on that stuff, and if you want to install some of these and see what's going on, and if you want to just not install, I think that's probably a decent idea as well. As long as, I like, what am I giving? Like, I am ignoring security concerns myself, so that way I can click one button instead of click two buttons to do something. So it's like, yeah.
Yeah, it's also like, that's how, if we're annoyed by this stuff, there's no chance that regular users are going to want to use this type of stuff. Regular users, unfortunately, don't care as much as we do. And we're not going to implement such aggressive things into it. That's why, like, everyone likes to hate on Apple, but I feel like they mostly care about our privacy. I know that people are probably saying, well, they care about selling your own ads. They want to be in charge, and Apple's the worst. And yes, I agree. I'm sure there's cases there, but I feel like mostly there's some use cases where Apple is protecting our privacy. I just wish they made it a bit easier. Same with like, have you ever, when an app it's like, can I have access to all your photos?
Yeah.
And I go, no. And it's like, okay, well, here's this pain in the ass, like, way now you have to opt into every photo. And it's just like, can you just show me my photos and I'll click them? I don't want to have to like select them and then you add them to my list of allowed photos and then I have to select them again. Just don't let somebody upload all of my photos. How about that?
That UI specifically makes me almost always check. Yeah, you can have access to all my photos because it is. I almost always want to be optimistic with it, and by like a weekend, I'm like, I've had it with this shit. It's like it's so obnoxious.
Question from James from London, UK. I love the show. I'm looking at adding a checkout flow to my site, and I want to know what kinds of things to be aware of when going in. I listened to episode 6. Oh, that was a long time ago. Accepting money on the internet. It was super interesting to hear the differences between Stripe, PayPal, and Braintree. I'm interested how things have evolved in 7 years. Is PayPal still difficult to work with? Is Stripe still the best? Do SDKs and APIs have the same flow? Would love you to revisit that episode. Yes, so I actually just rebuilt my whole checkout, and I did this whole song and dance. And PayPal is getting better, and Stripe is getting worse. PayPal is still awful in many, many ways, but their stuff is getting significantly better. They have like gone on like a gut, basically deprecating all. One of my pains with PayPal was that you search something and you find like this old outdated documentation, or you find this old PayPal thing that doesn't work anymore and nothing works. So they're basically just gutting it all. And there's going to be just a couple ways to go about it. A lot of these companies as well are trying to push you in the direction of just redirect your user to us and we'll do it all, right? So that's a lot of people only support Stripe because you can use Stripe's checkout and then you don't have to implement anything in their thing. But for me, I want Stripe, but I also want PayPal. As much as I hate it, lots of people still use it, especially outside of the US. So I ended up going with Stripe Elements, which is their like embedded version. And then it's actually gotten quite a bit better over the times. You can style it pretty much any way you want. I integrated PayPal in it to make it look almost native. And then the benefit of that is you also get like Apple Pay and Google Wallet and Alipay.
That stuff works. Yeah.
It just works. So I probably would still tell you go the route of Stripe Elements, because almost always when you go like the Stripe checkout or you use some service, you're going to hit some annoying thing like, I can't do country-based coupon codes. I can't do this checkout logic that is specific to my use case.
I do tend to really like it when I'm on a website and they end up using the Stripe checkout, just because you can just text my phone and then my payment information's all there, well. Like as a purchaser. But as an implementer, I had to go with Braintree in the past because it was allowed you to support PayPal and credit card within like the same interface. But man, Braintree was just so rotten to work with. They got mad at me after that episode because it was just hard to work with, and it still is. So I don't know. Yeah, I think what you see a lot now is like services on top of these things, even where you have like Revenue Cat, you have Lemon Squeezy, you have man, I feel like there's a few of them. And I'm sure those are all good. It depends on what you need, but everybody who steps in between you and the payment processor is going to take a chunk. So if you need PayPal, you're probably going to be still getting a little bit more custom with it. If you don't, man, just go Stripe.
What kills me is Stripe supports PayPal as a checkout option, but only in the UK.
Yeah.
And like I have emails going back like 6 years with some of the people that work at Stripe being like, can I please just enable PayPal as a payment option? You know, I would love to just go away from this whole second implementation of the code base, which is PayPal's implementation. And the problem with Stripe that I was having is that there's so many different ways to do things. And every time I had an issue, I would jump into their Discord and they'd be like, well, you could, instead of doing it on the client, you could do it on the server first. And it just break my entire flow.
Yeah.
Or both Stripe and PayPal, I'm using a dialogue, but Stripe and PayPal often will have to put up their own dialogue because when you're in Europe, they have this like 3D secure, which is you'll have to like input your banking password or send a text message and put the code in. So when that happens, you can either redirect them to another URL, but if you want to keep them on the page, they will try to embed an iframe to the bank. But then that thing goes underneath the dialogue because the way that dialogue works with top layer, you can't go over top of a dialogue with Z-index, right? It's impossible.
It's a top layer. Yeah.
Stripe and PayPal need to both move to dialog box. And I've had an issue open on both of theirs for 6 months. And every couple of weeks, some poor soul comes in and goes, but it's also made me rethink, like, are we overusing dialog boxes just because it's easy to pop something up?
Yeah, right.
The answer to that might be yes.
Yeah, for sure. Cool. Next one from Anon. Christmas gift episode this year, please. I put it on the calendar. So yes, we will do a gift episode and we will have it out at the end of November. So you have some time.
Beautiful. I'm looking forward to that. It's been a while.
Me too.
I Can Has Code says, I noticed some cloud service providers allow for the creation of resources that take a few minutes. So for example, you create a new box on DigitalOcean and it says like, it's procuring it, it's setting it up, it's installing, right? Sometimes takes a couple of minutes. While the process is in queue, the user interface displays some information about the resources being created. In some cases, there are multiple steps along the way to give the user feedback on how each one is complete. Often this allows the user to navigate away from the page and back to check on progress or continue when there's a notification. Is this just long polling WebSocket streams or is there something else involved? Much appreciated. Yeah, so there's several ways that this can be done. When you click a button to create a resource, the resource will send back I'm working on it, right? And that
I'm working
resource
here.
of I'm working on it could be a stream, like you said. Server sent events are probably the most common implementation for streaming from the backend. And this will allow you to send, as you get updates on the server, you can send data to the client as it's going. WebSockets is another one that'll give you sort of two-way. And then the third one is just long polling, meaning that every 10 seconds you pull the backend and say, hey, how's the server going? And I think in most cases, it's just going to be long polling, because with streaming or with WebSockets, you got to make that connection. And if somebody closes the tab and then opens it up again, you got to make that whole connection again anyway. And also, if you have it open in multiple tabs, if you open it, close it on your thing, open it in your iPhone, there's all these like weird use cases where it's probably not worth streaming that data when it's so low stakes, right? Chat application, AI response, yeah, that's probably a good use case for streaming WebSockets, but simply just checking how something is doing, you simply can just ping, ping, ping every 10, 15 seconds, and then the server will say, yeah, still working on it. Right now I'm combing the hair of your Drupal machine so we can get that thing ready.
Top form, Wes. Between the combing the hair and yeah, it's hilarious. Sick. Nice answer. Next one from John. Is it safe to store access and refresh tokens, etc. in a cookie? I'd always thought that the recommended pattern was to store that information in some sort of DB store like Redis with a session ID and then return the session ID to the browser and store it in a cookie, which presents some service design challenges. Thoughts on this? Thanks, love the show. So yeah, there's a lot of strategies for this. Sometimes you just do put a session ID in a cookie, but a session ID isn't, in my mind, any more inherently secure than putting the access and refresh tokens in a cookie, because both of them give you access. So like a session ID token is really just saying you have initiated or started a session. That session is validated, verified in the database, and if that session is needing to be refreshed, then you use the refresh token to refresh that session. So you're wondering if this is secure to store them in a cookie. The answer is yes, but the right way to store them in a cookie if you want to be the most secure with it. Now, granted, there's caveats to this where you can store these in normal cookies in certain ways and have it be fine, as long as you have proper like CORS protection and stuff. But if you want to be the most secure here, which by all means, I think you probably do, right? The way you want to store any of these cookies, whether it's an access or refresh token or anything, is with a secure, same site, HTTP only cookie. HTTP only means that the client JavaScript cannot access this token. That means no extensions, no scripts, nothing can access this token from the client, right? So yeah, you can pop it open in DevTools and see that it exists. It's saved into the client, but you cannot access it with JavaScript. 2, secure. Secure means that this cookie will only be sent inside of a secure context. So not HTTPS, it's not sending the cookie. 3, same site. Same site as an attribute that allows the cookie to be sent to the application if the requested origin is from the same domain. So that can work for subdomains too if you have an API dot, whatever. So if you have those 3 things inside of your cookie being stored, it's really, you can store access or refresh tokens, right? Because the client has no access to get to those. And the attack vectors are limited in that regard, right? Because that's really what you have to worry about. So they're being sent over HTTPS, they're only being sent to the same server, and they're not being able to access on the client. That's a pretty common way to do this. And Wes, I've been diving into a lot of different auth patterns lately. I'm like writing a JWT auth for my drop-in, and there's all kind of wild different auth patterns out there. I always did it this way, where you have an access token and a refresh token saved in an HTTP cookie, or potentially just a session ID. But yeah, I'm getting into more different things now. So yeah,
maybe we should do a whole show on it. I think the only scary thing about having the refresh token in a cookie alongside your session cookie is that if someone does get access to your session ID, they could potentially have access to it for quite a while longer. But if you look at these hacks that are happening. For example, the Linus Tech Tips YouTube got hacked a couple of months ago. And the way that it worked is that there was some virus that got onto their computer. And if you are on someone's computer, you can go into the bowels of your computer, like application support files, and you can grab the Chrome data from that. And you can basically just take that Chrome data cookies out and then paste them into another Chrome instance, which is going to be somewhere else on a computer. You refresh the page, boom, you're signed in as that user. Almost always they have like a bot that's going to immediately do what they want, which is delete all your videos, put up some crypto scam, and it's just going to happen immediately, right? But I guess like if they wanted access to it for even longer, they could just keep refreshing it with the refresh token. But you're kind of screwed either way, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, and if you're wondering about, like, I think it's pretty common too to like hash your refresh token if you're saving that into the database somewhere as well. There's some patterns around there, but yeah, like Wes said, you're kind of pooched either way if they've gone through those links.
Last question from Corey. I sometimes find myself stuck in a hole trying to fix a TypeScript error when I know the code works fine and it feels like a waste of my time. Is it all right to leave TypeScript errors as they are? Or is the goal to have 100% TypeScript error-free code? This is kind of an interesting question. I thought you'd get our thoughts on it. Yeah, sometimes you think, oh, there's a TypeScript error here, and you go, ooh, what is that? And you pull at it, and it sort of unravels, and you go, oh, wow, this is much bigger than I thought it would, right? You're just 18 levels of inference deep, and I don't know if I'm going to be able to fix this type of thing, and it works fine. Many times in my life I've been like, it works fine. But you also know how many times I've also been bit by saying it works fine. That's not going to be undefined.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah,
that's a big one for me. Is it's not going to be undefined. It might be.
Not.
You know, put in a use case for it. Sometimes it's annoying. In those cases, you just check yourself before you wreck yourself and say, am I just annoyed because I want to get it over with, or am I annoyed because I'm not understanding something? So obviously dip into it a little bit more, but at a certain point, whether it's like a dependency doesn't have really good types or whatever, I think it's either okay sometimes to leave a TS ignore in there, or you can do like a cast or where you say as. Often I'll find myself looking into libraries I mean, like, well, how are they doing it here in this library? And you look deep, and then it's just it's
casting.
It's just or coercing it into a specific type. So I think in some cases that's fine. Obviously, TypeScript is there to help you. And if you are turning things off, you really, really have to know, I know better than this, and not, this is weird. Why is this happening? Just turn it off, because there's probably something deeper there.
Yeah. Check yourself before you wreck yourself. TypeScript errors, bad for your health.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But what do you think? Do you ever, I'm trying to think if I've ever like just turned it off, because I don't know. In my like production apps, we even went through a lot of the syntax ones. I don't think I've turned any off. Almost always I'm able to dive in and actually fix it.
I only turn them off if I have my settings saying you need 0 TypeScript errors for this code to compile, right? To block the compile with errors. Yeah. I'll occasionally turn them off while I'm debugging, just to check to make sure the code is running or working or something before trying to solve like a meaningless TypeScript error, because sometimes there's some like odd ones here and there, and I'm like, this works fine, but let me just actually get this going so that I can and try this for a second in browser. I'll try it for a second and then remove the ignore or whatever. So I pretty much don't turn anything off. If anything, I turn off the ability to block the compilation with errors, because I especially if I'm converting something to TypeScript, or I validated or tested it pretty hard, I don't mind shipping TypeScript errors in that regard. There are people who will comment on any TikTok video like, you can't fix all the TypeScript errors, are you dumb? And it's just like, Well, I mean, there's situations where either whatever casting is required or, maybe even the vendor types are iffy or all sorts of stuff. So yeah, sometimes you need a little extra help and sometimes you can turn them off for a second, but just be aware of what you're turning off and on and test thoroughly. And
beautiful. All right, let's get into the next section of the show, which is sick picks. Do you have a sick pick for me?
Yeah, I have a sick pick for you. I don't know about you, Wes. This is going to sound like an infomercial. I don't know about you, but I had a really hard time finding, deodorant that wasn't, I don't know, like bad. Like they're either deodorant either like doesn't work or it's gonna kill you, right?
Yeah.
And so, I was so annoyed by this, and I went looking, and I found, of course, on Reddit, because you'll find recommendations for anything on Reddit. I found this stuff, which is like this. It's like a small company. They make it by hand, and they kind of explain how it works. Where it's really just they're using all natural ingredients and stuff, but it actually works. And the one thing that I really like about this compared to a lot of other natural deodorants is that like it lasts forever. I don't know if it's just because of the texture of it's a little bit harder or something like that, but it lasts forever. The scents are nice and manly. If you're a man, you might like this. There's also soaps and stuff like this, and it's a small company, so you feel nice for supporting it. Now, I think it's expensive compared to most deodorants, but I want to stress that they last forever. So I like hardly run out of these at all. And I don't know if I've had to replace it.
Does it crumble and get all over your shirts like all the other stuff I've tried?
No, it's a little thicker. You kind of have to get used to, like, you don't cake it on. It's just like one pass and you're good.
Yeah.
It's called The Black Stuff. Sorry, I did not say that. TheBlackStuff.com. And again, the scents are all really great. It's a small company. You feel good about buying from them. And again, it's more expensive than normal deodorant, but any of this stuff is, and it lasts me forever. So I've now tried 3 of the different scents, and I have to say, I'm a fan. Who knows when I'll have to buy another one, because 3 is a lot, but big fan.
Oh man, you can pry my Old Spice 80 pack from Costco from my cold dead hands. I've tried so many of these, and they either like pull my armpit hair out or get all crumbly on me. Maybe I'll give it a shot, but yeah, it's a hard world. You've probably tried a whole bunch of them.
I have, and that's why I'm stoked that I've landed on one. And I don't want to say this is not like some. I didn't just get these. I've actually been using this for like 6-7 months now. So
you don't stink
long term.
No one's made any comments.
No, it's important to my wife and I that I do not stink.
I'm going to sick pick a kind of an interesting charger that I put in our bathroom. So in the bathroom, I have to have some sort of charging block because I have to charge my water pick. I charge the my beard trimmer, my toothbrush, and like I've always had like a USB in there, and I'll plug them in. You only have to charge it like once every couple of weeks, so it's just you plug it in and then whatever. But I've always thought, I wish I could charge my watch in the bathroom because I usually take it off right before I get in the shower, and then I go, I don't want to go run and get the charger. So I got this one that it's like a charging block that has USB-A and USB-C, but then the top of it is an Apple Watch charger, and you just lay the Apple Watch over top of the charging block, and it's really nice because it's nice and compact. It just stays in the plug at all times, and you can just throw your watch on it. You get a couple, 10% or whatever charge, depends on where your watch is at, a couple percent, and it'll give you a little boosty boost for the day. And I'm a big fan of it. I was thinking, like, I wish that there was something like this. And then I went out there and thought, oh, somebody has made this.
It is good. That looks awesome. Yeah, I would use that for sure.
It stays in. Like, it has kind of like a wide flange base on it so that when you put the heavy watch on it, it doesn't like fall out, because everybody outside of North America knows how shoddy our plugs are here, where it'll like kind of come out and there's no fuse in any of our stuff, so like you can literally just drop something across the neutral and hot and it'll spark. So that was a concern of mine.
Yeah. I didn't tell you I got
Ooh.
the latest Series 10 or whatever Apple
Yeah.
Watch. I didn't go with the Ultra just because I wanted a little bit slimmer profile because I wear it while dancing and I don't want to
Yeah.
whack it on the ground. So yeah, mine was mine was one of the first ones. It's like Series 4, Series 3. So I've had it forever.
Oh, big upgrade then.
Yeah, it feels like a completely different class of device. It's like it's shockingly different. So yeah, shout out to the Apple Watch. Yeah.
I was the Apple Watch hater for most of my life, being like, I don't need another thing to give me notifications and all the annoying stuff, but I freaking love it. I have the Ultra, Series 9 Ultra, and it's on all the time, and I love that it gives me all my sleep stats, and I find I bring my phone out less now that I have it on, because like if your phone buzzes, you just go, oh, that's nothing, and especially for like security cameras, I love being able to just quickly glance and like, is there actually somebody at the door, or is it just a leaf that blew in the wind slightly?
Totally. Word. I'm going to shamelessly plug Syntax on YouTube once again. I feel like we're always shamelessly plugging this, but hey, the Syntax YouTube has been popping off lately, and we do a ton of great stuff over there. So youtube.com/@syntaxfm. Again, we're releasing all of these episodes plus way more deeper dives. CJ Reynolds is doing some crazy good stuff. I'm releasing or have released at this point a SvelteKit 5 or a Svelte 5 course. So if you want an introduction to Svelte 5, maybe you've never used Svelte at all, this is for you, because I'm not assuming that you've ever used Svelte in this course, and it's enough to get you going, cover the basics, get you up and moving, and we'll toss in some little, if you use React stuff here and there, but for the most part, just get you up and running is really the point. So check it out, youtube.com/@syntaxfm.
Beautiful. All right. Thanks everybody for tuning in. Catch you later. Peace.